Picture this. I'm hanging off the side of a roof, and the only thing stopping me from an 8-foot drop are the two people on the top holding onto both my hands. Of course, you're wondering how I got here, right? I am a travel writer, and it's my job to go to great lengths for the sake of a good story. In this particular story, I was in Austria writing about a wine region. And as I was snapping photos of the vineyard, one of the winemakers turned to me and said, "You know, the best view is up there on the shed." So we climbed up this semi-dilapidated shed and overlooked this incredible view of this sprawling green vineyard. And just in the furthest distance were the hills, city rooftops of Vienna. My journey into travel writing did not happen overnight. In fact, it was pretty nonlinear. In my late 20s, I sold half of my belongings and moved to South Korea, where I was going to first become a teacher. If you've ever lived somewhere as an expatriate, you know it's a bit like being in tourism limbo. You're there long enough where you're no longer a tourist, but you're not quite a local either. In a country as homogenous as South Korea, I didn't even look like a local. I've had people on the street stop me to examine my hair, ask if my eyes were real. One time, a little boy and his mom came up to me and went, "Are you Britney Spears?" I did not fit in. But despite not fitting in, Korea began to feel like home, and so I settled in. I joined community events and recycled, just did the normal things. I even joined a Zumba class, which, by the way, I didn't understand a word they were saying. But every Thursday night, I was there gyrating to Latin music with a couple of Korean grannies. Travel has exponentially improved my life and has given me these amazing memories that I love, as it does for so many people. However, I'm here today to expose something about the industry, which is that for every wonderful experience we have, there's often a hidden negative. While living in Korea, I began to write about my life as a traveler/local. And these turned into writing assignments that were actually paid from publications. That's the real dream. And so at the end of this year, I fully embraced life as a travel writer because it was what I wanted to do. My job was taking me next to Thailand, where I was going to write about elephant sanctuaries. I was in Chiang Mai, in the northern part of the country, and to get to the nearest sanctuary, I rode a stiflingly hot bus 2 hours out of the city center. Thailand has these jungles that are thick with humidity, where condensation drips off of surfaces, and tarantulas there are like the size of your palm. I learned that sanctuaries are where elephants go to retire in Asia. But as I was flipping through my notepad of questions, I realized that there was one without a clear answer. What jobs are these elephants retiring from? And when I arrived at the sanctuary, I saw the scars. These huge 4-ton animals had long slices across their shoulders. And their skin, which is up to 1 inch thick, had deep gashes in them. There's a substantial market for docile elephants because tourists want to take pictures and ride them. But tourists rarely, if ever, ask about the methods used to make an elephant docile. You might have noticed something about these stories. They're all about tourism, but they paint two very different pictures of the same industry, don't they? I could go on and on about these wonderful experiences, exploring the world. But if an elephant in Chiang Mai could speak, do you think that they would have anything positive to say about tourism? The negative that I told you about earlier, that hidden negative, is that travel is quite often very beneficial for the traveler and sometimes very negative for the destination or the people and animals that live there. And so this brought me to another tourism limbo where at this point I was working in the industry, promoting tourism, loving tourism. And at the same time, I was acutely aware of how detrimental it could be. So I was wondering if there was a possibility to make it positive for everyone involved. I put my journalist hat back on and I began interviewing people around the world with a central question. What does it mean to be a good traveler in your country? And now these interviews took places with people living in Thailand, Japan, Italy, Spain. One interview that really stood out to me, though, was closer to home. I met a woman living on Lake Tahoe, one of the most visited destinations in the United States. Despite its beauty, the lake was on FOTOR's Do Not Travel list in 2022. Boats are turning the water brown, traffic jams around the lake belt were the norm, and the local ecosystem was dying. Now, as a resident, the woman I interviewed had bore witness to the negative effects of tourism for 20 years, but was also renting her property out to visitors. So she decided to take an opportunity here and do something positive for the lake. You know, when you go to a rental property, there's usually a guest book that tells you the Wi-Fi password and the house rules. It usually tells you to take out the trash and strip the bed sheets, even though you paid a cleaning fee, that sort of thing. Well, her guest book was different. Instead, she documented the flora and fauna that her guests would find right outside of the property and guided them on how to ethically interact with the lake and its visitors. Now, during this interview, what she said to me was, when people get to learn about a place, and not just read about it online, but immerse themselves in the beauty and the fragility of it, that's when they truly start to care. As I mentioned, these interviews took place with different people around the world, and so naturally I received a variety of responses. Not all of them were positive. A protester in Barcelona told me that they wished for a complete and total ban on travelers in their city. And then I was surprised to hear as well one of my colleagues say something quite similar. They told me that many of the world's destinations would be better off if there were no travelers at all. But we need travel. Mark Twain famously said that travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. And in 2014, a study published by the Social, Psychological, and Personality Science Journal found a positive correlation between the breadth of one's adventures and generalized trust, acceptance of other cultures, and an increased level of empathy. Dr. Marion Diamond, the professor of neuroscience who studied Einstein's brain, found a positive correlation between new experiences and our cognitive powers. So it's not a question of if we should travel or if we need to travel, but a question of responsibility. Since we stand to gain so much from our experiences, what do we give in return? And how do we take care of these world destinations? While I've been searching for these answers, I remembered this time back when I was in Austria, actually, when I was climbing to that roof with those winemakers, if you remember from earlier. Something that the winemaker had said to me reframed what I thought meant to be a good traveler. This winemaker in particular, who I interviewed, had specialized in a type of wine that's quite popular in Austria. It's made from a field grape. A field grape is a wild plant. So it grows however it wants to grow, and it has a variety of grapes. So that means every single year it tastes a little bit different. And the winemaker said to me, it's never perfect, but it has a soul. Isn't that beautiful? And so this occurred to me in that moment that travel was also never intended to be perfect. And yet so often we try to make it that way, right? We follow these intensive itineraries that pack up our days down to the minute. We go to only the restaurants we found on TikTok and Instagram. And then in our pursuit of predicting what our experience will be, we forget the most important part, which is that the destination has a soul. So what if, instead of seeing ourselves as temporary visitors, we saw ourselves as temporary stewards of this soul? If we began to ask, how can I be a good traveler here, right now? Then we would have no other choice but to care about our destinations. And when we start to care, we then start to take care of. So I've learned that getting to know the destination soul relies on 3 pillars: curiosity, flexibility, and stewardship. The first pillar, curiosity, could best be described by my time back in Thailand. I was there to write about elephants, but one night at a bar, I also, quite serendipitously, made some friends. I sat beside a Thai couple and we began to chat, and we decided to go out to lunch together the following morning. So fast forward to the next day, they picked me up in their car and we drove an hour into the jungle, which again was the same jungle with all the tarantulas. So I was kind of freaking out. But we reached a lake with trees, and I was looking at this body of water and I was thinking, well, where's the restaurant? But then we got a little bit closer and I saw that there is actually some people picnicking by the water. There was an outdoor grill, so there were some cooks there working behind that, and then barefoot waiters running dishes back and forth between the two. So my new friends, they did not bring me to a Michelin restaurant. They didn't even bring me to a restaurant with walls, but they did bring me to a place they like to eat at, and I thought that was so cool. What this has to do with curiosity is understanding that the destination you go to may very well have two sides. There's one side that's perhaps packaged and marketed for tourism. And then there's another side that's the local experience. That's what people who live there like to do. Sometimes these don't cross, and you can certainly enjoy both. But if you want to get to know that destination's soul, you have to be curious about the latter. Pillar number 2 is flexibility. When we go on a trip, we usually have a few short days or weeks to see and experience as much as possible. Now, we don't want to sacrifice our time at the altar of serendipity, so we obsess over curating that perfect itinerary of when to travel, where to stay, and what to eat. Do you know what most itineraries leave out, though? Time for spontaneity. Anthony Bourdain called those happy accidents. He said, you can't experience a fantastic meal without the threat of having a bad one. So, when we obsess over itineraries, we do get an organized plan, but at the expense of happy accidents. And that third pillar was stewardship. I'll tell you a quick story about stewardship. If you look at images on Google or any search engine of Bali, Indonesia, you know that it has beautiful, pristine beaches. But sometimes if you go for a swim in Bali, you'll actually be wading alongside plastic bags and bottles. As beautiful as Bali is, there is a plastic problem there. Data shared on The Guardian found that Bali, Indonesia alone produces over 300,000 metric tons of non-biodegradable plastic every year. The tourism industry doesn't help with that. So one traveler saw how litter was slowly taking over the archipelago and decided to do something about it. During her next visit, she began orchestrating a beach cleanup with her and her siblings. And at first, these were just small afternoons spent picking up litter on the beach. But eventually, word got out about it. And soon more volunteers started showing up, many of whom were also visitors there on a short stay. So if you want to get to know your destination soul, curiosity, flexibility, and stewardship will help you do it. When Mark Twain said that famous quote, that travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, he solidified the importance of what it means to explore. But he did say that long before globalized tourism, and now he might have also added that travel can be fatal to our favorite destinations if we aren't careful. I think we travelers can do incredible things with a few small changes. If we start to center our experiences around those 3 pillars, curiosity, flexibility, and stewardship, then we'll begin to treat beloved world destinations like we really love them. Travel is still one of the greatest gifts to give yourself. Now it's time we give that same gift to our destinations. Thank you.